This episode is proudly sponsored by Main Street Magazine. Happy Moxie Monday, Mary. How are you?
I am ready to get moving because we have an awesome guest. Her name is Elaine Gonzalez Johnson. She is the founder and executive director of Latinas in Motion, which is dedicated to getting women of color up and healthy and moving. And she is a dynamic person. I heard about her through a coworker, Anna Maria, who is a member of Latinas in Motion. And she was telling me about her involvement with the club. And I thought, this sounds amazing. So I Googled Elaine, and lo and behold, she's got Moxie.
I cannot wait to hear all about it and learn all about her work and who she is.
Yeah, I think you and our listeners are in for a treat. So let's get to the starting line with Elaine. So Elaine, so good to have you on this podcast. And we're really excited to hear your story of Latinas in Motion and Mogul Mommy and your other work. But we have to do some stuff first, and that is to ask the question of how you define Moxie.
I define Moxie. You know what's funny is that's not a word that I use. I actually had to really think about it. How would I define Moxie? I would define Moxie as that special power, that sauce, right? We all have this special sauce that we're all born with, but definitely this grit, this zest for life. I'm going to do it because I said I was going to do it. And as a person, that's so who I am. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. And so that's when I think about Moxie, that's what I think about.
That is a very spirited definition. And it seems to fit your personality and your work. So given that, how do you see that definition operating in your own life?
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about Moxie, it is so in who I am as a person. I think so much. So when I grew up in North Philadelphia, I'm Puerto Rican, right? And so there was nobody looking at me and saying you're going to be a mogul when you grow up. You're going to be a speaker when you grow up. It was kind of just surviving. And it wasn't until I went to college that I went to college to ensure that I had this success, right? Whatever success meant. But truly, it was just to get out of my circumstance. I knew that I didn't want to stay in North Philadelphia. I knew that I wanted to stop living below the poverty line. And so education to me became the North Star of, if I'm educated, then I'll make money, right? But I think that was just the first step of okay, who am I? And I think we don't ask that question. What do I like? Who am I? What am I interested in? What hobbies do I have? And I started doing the self-work in college to really, truly figure out, what was I created in this world for? And the more I fell in love with who I was, the more I figured out, this is who Elaine is, and this is her gift, and this is her purpose, and this is alignment, and this is what it means to be a Latina, to be a business owner, to be a wife, right? For me, not for anybody else, but for me. I think that's when I'm I got this, right? And I think people with Moxie kind of find other people who have Moxie too to be oh yeah, you got that sauce, you got that spirit. And so now I'm in my late 30s. I know who I am. I'm sure of who I am. I walk into every room, virtual or in person, with the authority of this is who I am. I know that I'm a gift. I know that I have purpose. Take it or leave it. That took a lot of lessons and hardships and heartbreaks and no's and failures for me to get here. But once you got it, baby, you got it. And nobody could take away your Moxie.
Wow. Okay, we could stop there because that was so powerful, but we've got a lot more episode to go. So, Thora, do you have anything you want to
I was just bobbing. I was just bobbing my head. I'm yeah. Were there along the way? I mean, that's a lot of power to come to and within yourself, but it's also a lot of courage and just inwardly, that to own that from inward and then radiate it out. Were there along the way any steps there or things that happened that were stepping stones to, getting to that for you, just mentally, emotionally?
Oh my gosh, yes. There are so many. I think that I've always been a very overweight kid, right? And so when you have this experience, people project things onto you that build seeds that you think is true about yourself, right?
Right, right.
So in the Latino culture, unfortunately, we start to give each other nicknames that are really not warm and fuzzy. So, like, I remember growing up, my grandmother would be like, "Hey, gordita," which means like, "Hey, little fat girl." And
Oh
although
my
she meant
God.
it as a term of endearment, I felt like, oh my gosh, I think it was the first time that I started to look in the mirror and say, what's wrong with me? Right.
Right.
Even though she must have meant it as like a term of endearment, for me, it's like, who do I have to be? And those questions continued and continued and continued. So I'll go to college, and my whole life, picture me living in a bubble. I lived in a bubble in North Philly where everyone in my neighborhood was Latino. Everybody in my school was Latino. I end up going to college, Bloomsburg University, predominantly white institution. So I go into this space wanting freedom, wanting success, wanting education, yet not being sure of who I am.
Right.
Now I'm in these classrooms where I'm the only Latina in my class, where I look different. I'm wearing red lipstick, I'm wearing hoops, I'm affording education with student loan debts. And here I am in a classroom where everyone feels super smarter than me, right? Was that true? No, the perception of I was projecting like they're smarter than me. They have more money. They come from better neighborhoods. Their parents are still together. My parents were divorced. I had daddy issues. My daddy left. Like all of these things where I really had to force myself to think about who am I going to show up as in this space.
Right.
When I would take sociology classes and the professor would say, okay, we're going to talk about the urban neighborhood, everybody kind of just turns around and look at me because I look urban, right? And so it forced me to have an answer of like, okay, how am I going to represent? So with these experiences where some people would fold, I decided, let me figure out who I am. If I'm going to have the opportunity to say something, let me say something. So I started to just do research on what it was like to be Latina, what it's like to be Puerto Rican, being unashamed. I think certain people will take it as like, well, you grew up poor and, your mom was a single parent and all these things. I took it as, man, that's my power, right? That's my superpower. I learned how to be resilient. I learned how to be self-dependent. I learned how to just show up fully as myself. If I looked at my mom's struggle with 4 kids and make it work, you better believe me with an education, right? With opportunities, with resources, I better be somebody. Because even at that young age, I knew that I wanted to break glass ceilings for Latinas behind me, right? It's like if I'm showing up in this space as the only Latina in this classroom, the one of the few Latinos in this institution, then who am I going to become? And who can I ensure that I inspire to say, you know what? If Elaine could do it, I can too. Because that's the thing that people forget. Like sometimes you can't be what you can't see. And we think about that and feel like, oh man, but like there's power in that, like there's so much power in that. So going through college, I think it really taught me to be firm on who I am. I met my husband in college. He was the baddest man on campus and I scooped him up. Okay. And I think that I decided to go to therapy so that I could heal. I didn't want to go into a marriage. We got married right after I graduated. I knew that if I wanted to make this work, and because I didn't have any examples of what healthy relationships were like, let me heal so that I could come into this marriage as a complete person, right? Self-assessment, the ability to self-assess. When we talk about Moxie, I think self-assessment has to be like right under there of like, how can I look at my life and think about how can I become better? What are some areas in my life that I need to heal from so that I don't hurt people that never broke me to begin with, And I think as life continued on and I am in this amazing marriage. Can you believe my husband and I are going to celebrate 16 years of marriage?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we have these 2 kids and I'm just like always instilling in my children. We do affirmations every morning. And it's just like, who are you? And you're amazing and you're great. Like, it's just who I am. But I think it started off with ensuring that if I'm going to take up space, I'm going to take up space being exactly who I was created to be, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense.
It sounds to me like you are so self-aware. And I find that many people are not, or they fight being it because it's hard. Because you have to look at your faults and you have to own them, and you have to decide if you are okay with having those faults or if you want to move on from them. So in your work, how do you approach people with that, with, self-awareness and how to deal with it?
That is so good. That is so good. Like, we could just go to sleep right now because that question is so good. And so many people miss that question. Being self-aware is so important. Like, so many people talk about purpose, right? It's like a highlight, a keyword, right? Oh, purpose, and live on purpose and live on purpose. In order for you to live on purpose, you have to know who you are. And in order for you to know who you are, you have to be self-aware and continually self-assess. And so for me as a person, as a human being, I wear so many hats, but I feel like at the end of the day, I have to check in on me. I have to think about, how is my spirit feeling today? How is my soul? Where's my love tank at? Like, my husband and I, we have like this business meeting every Sunday, and we literally do it and just ask each other, like, where's your love tank at? Because I could think I'm killing it as a wife, and then my husband says, I'm about at a 2. You at a 2? And making sure that you're not offended, right? Like, how can I do things better? How can I fill up your love tank, and vice versa? Because I could think that I'm killing it and I'm giving him love and I'm affirming him. And he might be thinking like, well, that's not what I needed in this week. You know what I mean? That's not how I needed to be loved in this week. And the same thing with our children. So I think the first thing you need to know is, for me as a person, I do a lot of reading. You could call me corny, but I believe that leaders are readers. And so I read a lot of books about faith, about leadership, about love, about self-awareness, and continually pouring into myself, because nobody, spoiler alert, nobody has arrived. Okay. A lot of people are out here pretending that they have it all together, but I pinky promise everyone is a work in progress, and we're all just figuring it out as we go. Right. Because as you get to another level, as you get to another season, as you get to another chapter in your life, there's going to be something else that you have to relearn about yourself. Who I was before being married was a different version of Elaine. Now I'm a wife. Now I have 2 kids. That's a totally different version of Elaine. Now I have a career, right? That's a totally different version. So I think for you to think that you're going to be a person and live like that your entire life without ever having to make adjustments, without ever having to make, without ever having to be self-aware, you have to reconsider your frame of thinking. If you truly want to live your best life, come on, somebody, you have to ensure that you're always pouring into yourself, always learning, always reaching out to figure out, okay, how can I become an even better version of myself? For me, wellness is key. I'm a firm believer that movement is medicine. And so I do a whole lot in the wellness space. I'm a marathon runner. I work out a lot. I'm a Peloton girl. Like, there's so many things that I do to ensure that my wellness is top priority, because nobody gets to reap the benefits of a whole Elaine, of a healed Elaine, if I feel like I'm a hot mess. So I feel like when I am my best self, when I am my healthiest self, when I feel well, then everyone benefits from a happy wife, a happy mom, a happy business owner. And so those are some of the things. But if you read any books on like how to be a millionaire, they're going to tell you to read, they're going to tell you to attend conferences, they're going to tell you to work out, they're going to tell you to drink water. And then I will say also in there, mind your business. If we minded our business, we would be in such a better place in life.
I have 2 questions. One's a quick one, one's a longer one. Who's your Peloton instructor?
That's a great one.
I'm an Allie Love girl.
Allie Love is amazing. I love Camila Ramon. She is like my spirit animal. I love her.
Okay, I have to check her out then.
You do. Camila Ramon. She has like walk runs, and then she also has like bike.
Okay. The second one is this notion of prioritizing yourself. And Thorne and I were talking about, like, as women, there is messaging about constantly doing for others. And I feel for myself and possibly others that when you do for yourself, you're being selfish. But you're positing a different, almost a self-full attitude of, if I'm not the best, I can't give my best to all of those I need to serve. So can you pick that apart, how you prioritize yourself when you have many other demands? How do you keep yourself fully in the focus?
That's a great question. I would say that I live my life in a way where I reverse engineer. So every week I start with what is my non-negotiables this week, right? So non-negotiable, I'm driving my children to school. Non-negotiable, I'm dating my husband on Friday. Non-negotiable, I'm, going for a run 4 times this week. And then everything else fits the pockets of the times that I'm not doing those things. Whereas most women will say, okay, I got to work. I got to do the laundry. Let me tell you something to your face. Whatever doesn't get done, if the laundry doesn't get done, I'm not going to crucify myself for not hitting this wild expectation that we as women have on ourselves. The house always has to be clean. The dishes always has to be washed. The laundry always has to be done. There are going to be some things that don't get done, and that's completely okay. Because at the end of the day, I have to ensure that I'm good with me. And this version of myself in 2024 really, I think, maximized right after the pandemic. I started to have really bad panic attacks because we were at home. We have a dog, kids. My husband is a school principal. So much was going on in that house that I felt like I had to keep together of like, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to do this and I got to do that. And the more I told everybody like, oh, I'm fine. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Your body will tell you that you are not fine. So you can continue to lie to yourself and say, yeah, you're okay. It got to the point where like my hair was falling off. And then I experienced for the first time in my life a panic attack. I legit could not breathe. And I'm just like crying. And my husband found me and he's like, oh my gosh, we need to call 911 because I've never experienced that before. But I got so exhausted of saying yes to everybody, of like, yes, I'll be there for you. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. To the point that it was hurting me physically, mentally, spiritually. And that's when I decided I can no longer live my life at this pace. And I am a recovering people pleaser. If you are a people pleaser, I hope you set yourself free because, baby, that is such a hard way of living. But it was in 2021, right after the pandemic, that I decided, even if I say no to somebody and it hurts their feelings, that is a yes I'm saying to myself. So what's the priority? Is it yes to everybody or yes to Elaine? And so I just started to get better at saying yes to myself. When I run, that's me saying yes to myself. When I get a facial, that's me saying yes to myself. When I go for a walk, that's me saying yes to myself. And I'm getting my power back, right? It's like I'm fueling up my spirit to ensure that I'm doing good. But I think unfortunately, it took me having a panic attack to realize I can't continue to live my life in this pace. So now what I try to do, and I hope if you're listening, you do the same thing, is what is going to bring me harmony, right? What am I trying to obtain? I'm trying to obtain whole life success, meaning that I want to ensure that I have a great relationship with my husband, that my kids know who their mom is, that I am doing work that has purpose and I'm aligned with it, right? But does that mean that my house always looks like nobody lives in it? No, my house is a hot mess, probably Monday through Thursday. And that is okay. As long as I have joy and I'm continuing to pour into myself, I think for me, that's the objective. That's the goal. That's how I define whole life success. But I will say, for anybody who's listening to this, I highly recommend that you define what success is for you, not for your parents, not pop culture, not what anyone is telling you what success is. What is that for you? For me, it's not about the purses. It's not about the car that I drive or the house that I live in. Am I having amazing experiences? I love to travel. I would much rather take a vacation to Aruba than purchase a designer purse. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It's that I've defined success for myself. Right. So I highly recommend that if you're listening to this podcast, take some time. in complete silence, really like get into a good groove and think about what brings me joy. What is success for me? And that is your rubric, not Mary's rubric, not Elaine's rubric, not Thorne's rubric. Like you have to figure out what is a good pace for your life. What does harmony mean for your life? And then you decide, okay, success for me is this. When you do that, life gets better, because even if somebody looks at me and says, well, Elaine, I think you spend way too much time with your husband and you would be more successful if you wasn't driving your kids every day. That's fine. That's their opinion, right? And I've already defined what success is for me. So I'm good with me. Doesn't matter what other people think. I hope that's helpful.
Very.
Boy. All right. We're going to try to figure out a question you can answer, but I don't think it's going to be possible.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Main Street Magazine. Main Street Magazine is a monthly magazine and a website with daily content, and we love to feature people, places, and things that make our community special. To learn more, please visit our website, www.mainstreetmag.com.
I'm very curious about the role of spirituality and faith in this equation. And then we do have to segue over to Latinas in Motion and that organization. But you have a planner that's Plan, Pray, and Prosper.
Yes.
What role is that in helping you? Does that play in helping you find your purpose or identify or unearth your purpose?
So in 2016, at the time, so I started my first business, Latinas in Motion. It's a nonprofit organization in 2012. So what happened was I started this business just like, I'm going to do it. You know, I got this idea, I'm going to do it. I had that Moxie. Y'all gotta get that Moxie. I had that Moxie. I said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And so many people started to find Latinas in Motion, colleges, universities, corporations, and would say, hey, I want to invite you to come speak. I didn't even know that you can get paid as a speaker. Spoiler alert, if you're listening to this, you can get paid, okay? You can get paid. Google it. But people started to say, I want to invite you to speak about what it's like to be Latina and start a wellness business. Okay, great. So then they would say, we're going to give you a check too. I'm like, oh my gosh, had no idea what I was doing. Like the first time I spoke, it's so funny because my college actually invited me to speak. The first time I spoke, I wore this green dress, I wore pearls because I was trying to show up in who I thought was a successful speaker. And I didn't show up in this space as myself. I had a PowerPoint presentation and I bombed it. I said, about 1 million times. It was so bad. And these people still were so sweet and sent me a check for that horrible speaking engagement. But it taught me that I had something to say. It taught me that I am very niche in what I do. And it taught me that if I want to get better at this thing, then I have to get better at this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started like looking at different YouTube videos of motivational speakers and try to figure out, okay, how can I craft my story? How can I get better at showing up in these spaces as myself? So I got better. And the better I got, the more people started to book me to speak. So everyone would ask me, I was giving them my heart, like, and Latinas in Motion is changing the world. And the one question I always received every single time was, you have great energy. How do you start your day? So this was about 2014, 2015. And so I started to give them the sauce. Like, well, every day I start my day and I write down what I'm grateful for, and they're writing that down. And then I have a to-do list and they're writing that down. And I recite affirmations and they're writing that down. Then I realized, wow, everyone is asking me the same thing. I'm giving them a formula, but I don't have anything to sell. And so I had this idea of, why don't I create that thing? If you're listening to this podcast, you do not have to have all the answers. You can hire people that will bring your ideas from your minds and bring them to life. So at first, this limiting mindset belief that I had was, well, who am I? I'm not a designer. How can I put this product together? I just hired a designer and helped me create this amazing planner. So the planner came out 2017. And the first day I sold like 400 copies. I'm like, wow. Oh my gosh, I'm out here winning. Let me tell y'all to your face, that first version of that planner was missing weeks. Okay. So the first product you put out is not going to be the most amazing product, but that's okay. Having Moxie means that you feel the fear and you do it anyways. And you can fix your mistakes and you can say you were wrong and you can keep going. So now we're like 6 versions into this planner, because just because something is great doesn't mean you can't make it greater. And I started to sell it. So now when people would ask me the question of like, how do you have this great energy? Well, you can use this Plan, Pray, and Prosper planner where it has all of the things that I do every morning. And people loved that. And I think that's a beautiful thing about entrepreneurship and business and creatives and being a visionary, is that there's not one way to do something. Life, if you continue to move at a good pace, if you continue to do the things that you feel in your spirit you were created to do, as you move forward, you're going to unlock a different version of yourself. Mm-hmm. Had I never created Latinas in Motion, I would have never been invited to speak. If I didn't say yes to that speaking engagement, I would have never had the opportunity to learn that I could create a planner. From that planner, we sold thousands of copies. Like, it's like a ripple effect of, as you continue to live your life and you move in excellence and you're unapologetic and you're not looking to the side and you're not comparing yourself and you're not copying anybody and you're just doing what you feel called to do, life continues to get greater and you feel this sense of joy and you feel this sense of fulfillment and you feel this sense of like being aligned with destiny. So when we're talking about faith, that is where I live, of ensuring that like whatever I was created to do, whatever gifts I have, talents I have, I'm going to leave this earth on E, meaning that I'm going to try all the things unapologetically. I'm going to pivot as many times as it takes to reach purpose. I don't live afraid of what people are going to say about me. I think that when people see me and they do feel like, well, Elaine does too much and how does she have time for this? It's just them projecting because they haven't reached that level of, well, I'm going to do what I want to do, and they're limited in their own beliefs. But once you break free and you feel freedom, I think there's nothing better than that. So I definitely live and move, and daily I'm grounded in my faith. And I teach others, right, to do the same.
But now we need to talk about Latinas in Motion.
Yeah.
That journey for you started with home exercise with your mother and sister, then on to walking, then on to running. I'm really interested. One of the things we talk about at the end is how people can move their Moxie needle. And we're all about, Thorin and I, about the baby steps and the increments. And I want you to talk about how Latinas in Motion got started and how you encourage women in community to take it all in increments and be okay with the small steps. Can you talk about that at all?
Absolutely. So I was working in education. A lot of my career was in the education space, and I got pregnant. I gained over 50 pounds with the pregnancy of my daughter. And so you take this very young professional, right? Crazy in love with her husband, but also is super overweight. And I was already a thick girl. So when I gave birth, I struggled with postpartum depression, and I've never, ever been athletic. I've never been to the gym. Nobody in my family was like, okay, let's exercise, right? And I knew that I had to do something because I wasn't feeling well, not physically, not mentally. And so I decided to walk. Walk became jog, jog became run. So at the time when I was working at this high school, one of my colleagues said, if you're running, you should sign up for the Broad Street Run. I told y'all in the beginning of this episode that I always do what I say I'm going to do. So I gave her my yes without doing the research. So I Googled Broad Street Run. It was a 10-mile run. Now, at the time, I was doing about 2-mile walk jogs. But I'm like, okay, I told you I was going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I used the Ministry of Google and I found a training plan and I decided to train myself to run 10 miles. When I get to the Broad Street Run in Philly, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of runners. And I felt this culture shock of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? You know, road racing is a very white sport. And so again, that feeling inadequate started to kick in of like, should I be here? Am I qualified? But I did. I trained. I should be there. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I run the 10 miles and I feel like I could fly. I get this medal. I am just like on top of the world. Nobody could tell me anything. And I had this idea of, what if I get other Latinas to feel this way? So I started to Google Latina running club, nothing showed up. Latina wellness group, nothing showed up. Now, this was in 2012. Today, there are so many run clubs and wellness organizations for Latinas. But in 2012, I didn't find any. So point number one for the listeners, I want you to know that if there's a deficit, that you have the idea to fill and fit that need to your job. When we talk about purpose, these are the moments that matter. I had the idea. I saw that no one else was doing it. I decided to do it. When we talk about moving the Moxie needle, I had no idea how to start a nonprofit. No one in my family was business owners, but I had this fire in me of like, I can do this thing. And so I text everybody on my phone. This is before Instagram, before Snapchat, before TikTok. There was just Facebook. Okay. If you're listening, it was just the Facebook. And so I decided to text everyone. We had 6 women and myself. We showed up on one Saturday, June 2012. We take a little selfie and the picture is so grainy and horrible. Thank goodness cameras have like upgraded since then. I posted it on Facebook. We started to get more inquiries. The next week we had 12 and then we had 15, then we had 25. Then I started to receive inquiries from New Jersey. Hey, I want to start a chapter. Did I know how to start a chapter? I did not. But everything is figure outable in life. You don't have to have the answer right then and there. What I told them was, I'm going to reach out to my team. They didn't know that I was a team of myself, right? But it bought me some time to figure it out. And then we started to expand to New Jersey, to New York. And this little idea that I had became this, amazing movement of Latinas getting active and getting healthy. And the funny thing is that although we use walking and running because we don't charge a membership fee and it's free to go outside, I knew not to call it Latinas running because although walking, jogging, running was great for me, I didn't want to limit women who just wanted or needed that empowerment. So we honor any movement. If you're on your Peloton, we're applauding you. If you're going for a walk, if you're doing Zumba, if you're taking a dance class, however you're finding joy in movement, that's what we're promoting. That's what we celebrate. That's what we honor. And I had no idea that this one idea would lead to so many women getting active across the country. But I think that's what Moxie is, right? It's believing in something that you don't know if it's going to work, but you feel it in your spirit that it's my job, it's my purpose, it's my gift to do this thing. And it turns out to be magical.
It's pretty compelling. I mean, when I met Anna Maria at work and she was telling about your organization, she had just come back from the runcation in Nashville. And that made me scurry back to the Ministry of Google and look up Latinas in Motion and find you. I'm interested in this movement as medicine and how movement breeds Moxie, that getting out of your head and into your body and just feeling it all going at once is a feeling not everyone experiences. And how do you bring, so say you have a woman who comes to you and has never really been in her body before in a meaningful way. How do you start that person out? Like what advice or what coaching or, I don't know, fitness wisdom do you provide?
So we start where we start. We honor all women from all activity levels. And I think it's so important to have like little milestones for yourself. So when I first started running, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I would literally run to the stop sign and then walk and then tell myself, okay, I'm going to run to that traffic stoplight and then walk. And then I realized as I started to get more into running and learning, that is literally a method. Like there's like this Hal Higdon method where it's like walk, run. You can do intervals of 2 minutes, 1 minute. And so depending on what chapter you're running with, we have chapters in Hartford, Connecticut, in New York, in New Jersey, and Philly. We start with asking women, okay, is this your first time here? Have you ever ran before, right? And we ensure that our little motto is like, no Latina left behind. So if you're just there to walk with us, we'll walk you through the entire way. And then next time you meet with us, we'll walk, jog with you and stay with you to ensure that you feel seen, you feel honored, and you know that you're not by yourself. I think the greatest gift of Latinas in Motion is that we're all women, we have families, we have careers. And when you're in your career, you lose that sense of team that you had when you were in like high school, middle school, right? And so Latinas in Motion has brought back this sense of team. What I love most about running half marathons, 10Ks, even a 5K. I love 5Ks, which is 3 miles for our listeners who are not sure what a 5K is, a 3-mile race. What I love most is that it gives you something to be proud of. It gives you this sense of, wow, I did that. I couldn't walk a mile before, or I couldn't run a block before. And here I am walking, jogging, running 3 miles and receiving a medal and being celebrated by my Latinas in Motion sisters. And now my children are looking at me and saying like, wow, how can I run next? When I look at my life, I didn't start running until I was in my 20s. My children have tons of medals in their rooms because they wanted to do as mommy did. And so my children started running their 5Ks when they were 4 and 5 years old, which when we talk about breaking generational curses, that's what we mean. If I didn't start running until I was in my 20s and I see my children running 5Ks as children and they know this is their norm, that's beautiful. That's legacy. That's changing our parts of the world. And that is something that I'm most proud of with Latinas in Motion. The fact that we have so many women, but these women who are running with Latinas in Motion have inspired their communities, their families, their children. That's the whole point of it. So if you're listening to this and you don't know where to start, you start where you start. You give yourself grace. You celebrate yourself along the way, whether it's walking a mile, whether it's taking a bike ride, whether it's signing up for a dance class at your community center, just finding time where you can, number one, pour into yourself. Number two, understand that you have one body, one. You don't get no do-overs. You can either take care of it or you don't. And if you don't, there are going to be prices you pay for that. I'd rather take care of it, right? And finding ways that I'm not looking at exercise as a punishment. And I think that's why it's so important for us to look at ourselves and realize, what do I enjoy? There are some people that I know absolutely hate running, but they love CrossFit. Do it. Live your best life, right? Some people hate CrossFit, but love to dance. Do that. But find something consistent that you're going to be true to yourself and you're going to commit to you. I think that it's so interesting that we will ensure that we get to work on time for our bosses, that we don't miss a doctor's appointment for our health, but we continually let ourselves down when we say we're going to work out and we don't. Oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Treat yourself, treat your exercise as that appointment that you wouldn't miss with your boss, as that appointment that you wouldn't miss with your dentist. Make sure that you don't miss appointments with you.
You hear that, Thorin?
I'm feeling guilty because I have used those excuses and I'm like, you know what? She's right. She's right.
So Elaine, what would you tell Thorin about feeling guilt right now?
I was just about to say, Thorn, do not feel guilty. That is not going to help you want to be better. Just take it as, okay, I'm going to make the decision. You want to know what's one thing it totally irks my soul when people say I try. Like, let's say I'm inviting Thorn to a Latinas in Motion walk run, and she'll be like, well, I'll try to be there. No, Thorn, decide. That's what I tell people. Don't try, decide. Decide, I'm going to wake up early and walk. Decide, I'm going to do 10 squats. Whatever it is, it's changing your mindset from I'm going to try to make it. Because if you say I try, that's still very gray. It's either you feel like it or you don't. But when you decide, yes, but when you decide whether you feel like it or not, you're going to make that thing happen.
I agree. And I mean, everyone has made these excuses. Oh, I'm too busy, this and that. But you're right. It's about a decision that you're making and a commitment to yourself and your overall wellness and health. And sure, we get sometimes wrapped up in the everyday life. And, you know, I'm guilty of that too. But, you know, it's like, you have to be like, you know what? I am going to do it because I can do it. And as you've pointed out, it's not, you don't have to get a membership. You know, it's free to go outside and walk. And, you know, if you go out with a group or if you go by yourself, there are ways to do it. And I think that's sometimes we forget that. And I'm guilty of that too. I can go out and walk my driveway. There's nothing stopping me.
And I think starting off small too, like, do you ever meet somebody and they're like, I'm going to work out every day this week? I think that's a bit much. Like, let's start off with, okay, I'm going to work out once this week. And then once you do that consistently, going up to twice. But the more consistent you are and the more you have a good rhythm on, okay, this is what I'm going to do this week, life gets better and it does actually get easier.
And the habit forms.
Right.
Yes.
I was just going to talk about habits. They say it takes about 3 months to break a habit. Do you talk about that with your folks who are in your groups at all, or how to break habits, how to create new habits?
Absolutely. Have you ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's so good. And he talks about what he taught me was habit stacking. So let's say I had an issue with making my bed each day, but I know that I'm always going to brush my teeth. So what he teaches us in the book is whatever habit you know that you absolutely do, just stack the habit that you want to create to the thing that you do. So if I know that I brush my teeth, then let me start to brush my teeth and make my bed right afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So and start off slowly. Don't try to stack 4 different new habits on one. Let's just start with one. And that's one of the things that we do. The reason why I sign up for so many races is because it holds me accountable to being healthy. Because especially, I don't know about you, but in the holiday season, when I say we eat good, we eat good. And so it's so easy for me to not work out because we're having holiday parties and we're having bake-offs and we're having cocktails and conversations and all these things that I'm like, oh, I don't want to work out. So when I sign up for races, it holds me accountable to my training. So if I know that I have a race that I have in March, I can act up in December all I want, but I know that I'm looking at that race date like, okay, girl, it's time for you to get in motion because you have this date. And so for me, that's what works for me. I sign up for a lot of races, 5Ks, 10Ks. My favorite distance is a 5K and a 10K, which is 3 miles and 6 miles, because running long distance is actually really, really hard. Yeah. I'm doing a marathon this year. And then I'm like, oh, why did I sign up for that? But it's my 5th marathon. I'm telling everybody it's my 5th and final marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles.
Oh my God.
I know, but I'm excited because when I ran my other marathons, my last 4, my children were really young and they're 10 and 14 now. So I feel like they understand the impact and all the hard work and the dedication that I'm putting into this training. So it's going to feel different for me seeing them, at the finish line for this marathon. So I'm excited for that, but it's a lot. It is a lot of work. So I love this 5K, 10K world, but I sign up for races to keep myself accountable to be active. Whereas if you don't have anything that you're working for, it's easy to say, well, I don't feel like it. But if you're a CrossFitter signing up for a competition, if you are, working out on a cycle, Peloton or whatever type of bike that you use at home or at the gym, there are different, you could sign up for of pledging to ride 100 miles, and then that'll keep you accountable. So trying to find competitive ways that are fun, but also will keep you accountable to your plan has helped me and so many other women as well.
So it sounds like it's, again, a self-awareness thing, to be self-aware enough to know what drives you and what will drive you and what will keep you accountable.
Yes. Come on, Thorn. Yes.
All right. I'll have to find my own self-accountability again.
Well, and I think the other thing is the baby steps. I mean, I'm kind of guilty of I'll never eat ice cream again for a year and I'm going to work out. And it's so vague as to be meaningless. And it's so big as to be impossible to sustain. And I've read stuff about habits where you start out doing something that's so small that you're guaranteed 100% success doing it. So if it's walking to the corner, that counts and that's your starting point and you're going to do it. And then you build on. So with Peloton, I start out with a 5-minute class. I'm like, okay, I did the 5-minute warm up and maybe that's enough for today, but maybe Allie loves calling me to do the 15-minute low impact. And so I stack that on. And so, and that's why I think their stacking is so helpful when you talk about habit stacking. It kind of gets you okay, I did one. Now why don't I just roll into the next one? But the other thing I wanted to talk about with the accountability piece is the community joy piece of Latinas in Motion, which is open to all women of color, not just Latinas.
It's open to all women. This space is for women to feel empowered, to feel inspired, to feel like somebody in life is giving you a standing ovation, a hey girl, hey. So it's for all women. Specifically, I focused on Latinas because Number one, I'm Puerto Rican. I wanted to disrupt this space of running, of the running community, right? There weren't many people of color, women of color in this space. And I wanted to showcase, like, listen, I'm here. The first woman to run a marathon in 1967 was Catherine Switzer, who was amazing. And prior to that, 1967 was not long ago. No. And prior to that, people literally thought women were not strong enough to run. Women could not run because we birthed children. We couldn't run marathons. And here goes Catherine Switzer, who signed up for the Boston Marathon under an alias, did not share that she was a woman, and she finished it. And I think that, to me, I am a feminist. I believe women can do all things, be all things. We are powerful, unicorn human beings. And so when I heard about that story, that's what actually inspired me to run my first marathon in 2012. Not having all the training, not having coaching, but I just felt like, if this woman did this and she disrupted this space, then let me go ahead and represent for Latinas. Latinas have very high rates of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. And doing something simple as walking, if you have the ability to walk, can help break those statistics down. Mm-hmm. So I share my story often, but it's for all women. And that's what I tell people. If you want to come join us, if you want to walk with us, if you want to jog with us, absolutely. There's power in community. There's accountability in community. And unfortunately, in the world we're living in, there's safety in community as well.
Right.
We ensure that we're going out in these trails, run, walk spaces to ensure that we're safe as well.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's a major factor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see, you talked about the seeds of this starting when you were a child and reframing that body image that you inherited from then. And now you talk about your own children, one of whom is a girl.
Yeah.
And do you see your mission moving down the age ladder to help girls with self-image in the face of like rampant social media? Where's your lower limit with Latinas emotion?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. So in 2015, I actually achieved one of my greatest dreams, to create and organize our very own 5K. So it happens in Philly and virtually. It's called the Peace Love Run 5K by Latinas in Motion, for the community, for anybody. Most people be like, do you have to be Latina to participate? No, anybody can participate. So it's so funny, in 2015, my son was 1 and my daughter was 5. And that was like the first time they seen hundreds of people. We had 500 people register for our first 5K. Wow. It was incredible. And each year we continue to have that same number, which is uncommon for small organizations to have that many people register. That is legacy. That is showing young girls. When you look at the run community, that our 5K that we have, about 87% are women, 87% are mostly women of color, but then we have men and children as well. And so for me, the affirmation or the legacy or what I want to teach, my daughter, my children, and everybody behind me, is that you can create a life that you love for yourself and be good with you and define what life is for you. Because I think, like, if we share the story of like, you have to be healthy. Well, what does health look like? Most people equate that to body size.
Right.
And so I'm looking at it from a holistic perspective of like, telling my kids, my daughter's name is Eva. Like, Eva, what do you enjoy? Right? Just because mommy likes to run doesn't mean that you have to do that to be like mommy. I'm very good on like, children are born with their own gifts and talents and interests. So I'm not going to force my daughter to be a rose if she was created to be a tulip, right? My job is to make sure that if she's that tulip, let me put her in the best possible way so she could be the best tulip she was created to be. But they know that movement is a non-negotiable in our house. When we talk about non-negotiables, my son is in karate. My daughter right now is in soccer, and just making sure that you don't have to do what mommy and daddy do, but you have to find a way to kind of release and move your body to find that joy. So when we're talking about like what I see Latinas in Motion to be, or what would be my dream, or what type of legacy do I want to leave for children, is for them to define what joy is for themselves, for them to be unafraid to live their lives, especially people of color. With all the systemic racism that happens in the world, you kind of feel like you have to hide your joy and shrink. And I teach my children, you take up space. You take up space. You make sure that every room you go into, they don't forget your name. And there's power in that.
Absolutely. Well, we are at that moment now, Elaine.
That went quick. I can't believe it.
I
felt like
know,
we were
I
just starting
know.
out.
You might have already covered this, but how would you tell someone to start moving their Moxie needle in a way that makes sense for them, whether it's in physical activity or living into their best selves in some other way? What's the one little grain of advice for an incremental movement that you'd give?
I love that. So the one thing I would tell you, which we didn't really talk about, but if you want to move your Moxie needle, I want you to sit down with your thoughts in a space that feels so much like peace. And I want you to write it down. We live in a world that is so loud, and there's so many messages and people telling you what you could do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And I want you to start realizing that the most important voice you will ever listen to is your own. And you have to be able to sit down and write down, what do you want for your life? What purpose do you believe that you have? What is an idea that you want to create? Ideas are wings. And start with writing it down. When you write it down, there is so much power in seeing it on paper. And then all you have to do is make it come to life by reverse engineering. Okay, if I said I want to do this, what steps do I have to take to do that thing? What do I have to do on a monthly basis, weekly basis? And then when you sit down and break it down into the day, right? So today I'm going to do this. That's going to help me move my Moxie needle. And then it becomes simpler. And then you don't have to look at this big idea as like, it's scary, but you've already broken it down to make it more realistic and doable for you. And it just compounds. You just compound that thing. And then before you know it, you're sitting down looking at your life. Wow, I really did do what I said I was going to do.
I love that.
When I teach students, I say there's 3 levels of existence: the idea in your head, getting it out on paper, giving birth to it in paper, and then saying it out into the world so that the universe can start percolating around that idea. Right. And so I totally agree with getting it out of you into the world in some way, and then chunking it in ways that make baby steps possible. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's also something that can be done in community, where you see this big idea, but someone else can say, okay, here's how you could put legs on that. So again, we're back to the community.
We're not an island, right? It takes community. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're stronger in numbers.
Elaine, thank you so much for your wisdom and your energy and your joy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so grateful to share space with the two of you. And I really do hope that someone is moved by this episode.
And maybe you'll see 2 pasty white women showing up.
I love it. Listen, come out.
Well, I hope to. I am dedicated to movement every day. So I am with you in spirit at the very least.
Awesome.
Me too. And I will say, you have inspired me. I've been thinking about it. Summers are really tough, which I know is an excuse. And going into fall and when the kids go back to school, it's a tough time. But, I've been thinking about it, but you like put the extra kick I needed to be like, you know what? And what Mary brought up earlier, what you just said in your moving your Moxie needle, is to put it down to paper. It's manageable, one step, and it doesn't seem so daunting. So, while you were talking, I was just for myself thinking that. So if anything, you have inspired me to do better for myself and my family. So I appreciate you. And I thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom and just knowledge with everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. That was amazing. But
so amazing.
I want to hear what you thought of Elaine.
I feel so invigorated right now. I feel so energetic and inspired by her. So I am, first of all, so grateful to her for taking the time and sharing her wisdom, not just with us, but with all of our listeners. For me, 2 huge takeaways. How she ended when you asked her how to move the Moxie needle. It kind of reinforced what you had said earlier on in the interview about just making stuff approachable and not like this big, huge thing that just seems so daunting that we don't even know where to start. So how she defined moving that Moxie needle and making it doable and writing it down so it feels tangible. I knew that somewhere in the recesses of my mind, but just her, putting it the way she worded it and phrased it just really reinforced that. And so my takeaway personally is that, just to put it down and, even if the dream is big or the goal is huge and it seems like I can't do that. Yes, you can. Just write it down and then start breaking it down. What about for you?
I agree. I liked her explorations around purpose.
Uh-huh.
And her thought that when you see a lack or a space where there's a need, that maybe you should be open to using your gifts to fill it. And I feel like that has very much defined her life and her work and her willingness to prioritize herself.
Yes.
Because a healthy Elaine is a more productive and giving Elaine. And then also to say no where she needs to say no, to really listen to that. So I like the self-work that she's done that isn't gimmicky. It's really authentic self-work, and it has truly made her dig deep and then shoot for the stars.
Yes. And along that, another thing I wrote down here is when she, and I quote, she said, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." It just, that was bouncing around in my head after she said it too. The fact that when she kept talking, I wrote it down because I think, it's like Steve Jobs said, feel uncomfortable too, that you can feel the fear. It's okay. But you still have to have the
Moxie.
belief. Yes. The belief in yourself and the moxie that you can still do it, even though it's scary or even though it seems, such a daunting task, or like, how will I ever accomplish that? That's good. You want to feel that because then it makes you, I think from my perspective, at least, it's that you're breaking it down. You're breaking the steps down to achieve whatever the goal is. So whether it be, like Elaine said, walking to the corner stop sign or, jogging to the next one, you can do it. It's just a matter of but initially it's like, oh my God, how am I going to jog that 500 meters? It's one step at a time.
Absolutely. And the last thing I enjoyed that I think I'm going to take away is this reverse engineering concept.
Yeah.
So when I make a to-do list, I tend to do the easiest things. That's how I prioritize. Like, what's the low-hanging fruit?
Right.
But instead, if I turn that to-do list on its head and say, what are my non-negotiables on this to-do list?
Yes.
And that becomes the organizing principle.
Yeah.
The way I accomplish it looks a lot different. So that was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah.
So, another good episode.
I'm so inspired right now, and I'm making my list and I'm checking it twice.
I'll see you next time.
See you next time. This episode is proudly sponsored by Main Street Magazine.